if you thought it could not get worse for Concord, well, we just got some new information, a new rumor that claims it got a whole lot worse. $400 million more worse. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. I wrote this over at thatparkplace.com. And I'm going to repeat that again. I wrote this. Seems to be there's a lot of comments not understanding that I write the articles that I read here at the Trent Report. But yes, I did indeed write this. And we have a report, a rumor from Colin Moriarty claiming that Concord reportedly cost $400 million to develop. And that does not include what Sony paid to purchase the developer, Firewalk Studios. Talk about a massive, massive financial disaster. Massive financial disaster. So he shared this in an upload on X. We're not going to watch any of this. I did transcribe a bunch of it. But he said this, that Concord cost about $400 million to make. He got that information from a Concord insider. He went on to reveal that Probably Monsters, the original owner of Firewalk Studios and Concord, that sold Firewalk and Concord to PlayStation Studios, Sony and the game's original investors had spent $200 million on the game before it even made it to its alpha state. He said this, up to the point of the game went to alpha state, they had already spent $200 million on it. And it's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game and how much of that was from Sony. I mean, these people spent $200 million on this game before they even got to the alpha state. Why would you even purchase this game? Why would you? What were you thinking? What were these people at Sony thinking? How dumb are these people? I mean, geez, talk about complete and utter incompetence. Talk about managerial malpractice. This is absolutely horrendous. I didn't think it could get worse, but they proved me wrong. They proved me wrong. Moriarty then shared this, though. When the game had $200 million spent on it and was basically in an alpha form in quarter one of 2023, from that point until the game launched, Sony by itself spent another $200 million on it. They spent another $200 million. What is this? Is this a Marvel Studios production? Are we looking at a Lucasfilm Star Wars movie where they just decide to spend ridiculous amounts of money and don't get any return? What is happening here? Is Sony following Kevin Feige and Kathleen Kennedy's business model? We're just going to flush money down the drain? That's what it looks like. He went on to this. The scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape when it was shown. Basically, when the alpha was ready to go. Why did they even purchase this? What were they thinking? It was in such horrible shape that Sony felt they needed to spend that much money again. So 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP, which is the minimum viable product status. MVP. I mean, can't make this stuff up, right? The MVP, most valuable player, is now minimum viable product. It's actually a negative instead of a positive. Jeez. Not to the status of it being a great game, to get it to just viability. Spent $400 million just to get this game to viability. What an absolute disaster. I mean, how is this possible? How is this possible? Sheer and utter incompetence. That's how. Moriarty then said this, a major expense was to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios to finish building the game out. And that two fundamental games were not worked on at all up to the point in which the game was shown in alpha. I think I might have mistranslated there a little bit. I think it's like it's probably like game mechanics or two important parts of the game. They were onboarding. Nothing about that. There was nothing about how players make their character, all that kind of stuff, or choose their character and get there. And monetization, two very expensive, very specific and boutique things that happen to games like this. So they didn't even have their onboarding or their monetization figured out. Just pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Later in the video, Moriarty claimed that executives at Sony and specifically PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst were championing the game and believed the game could be their Star Wars. So there you go. It's at the very top. It is the PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst who is championing this game throwing bad money after bad money that ultimately led to this game getting shut down about 2 weeks after it released, and then having to refund the people who actually bought this game their money. So they literally made nothing on this game. The only thing that they're going to get back is if they do some kind of impairment charge, where the government will basically like waive some tax money or do some accounting magic to make it so that their loss isn't as big as what it really is. We already said this, that Sony was describing the game as the future of PlayStation. They thought this game was going to be the future of PlayStation. If you listen to some of these developer interviews, I remember there was her name was like Kim Crines or something like that. She was like the director of IP, which I just thought was weird to have a position like that. Which now that kind of makes sense, right? She was bragging about their vignettes and all the characters and the story development that they were going to do. She was the one who was addressing the backlash of the trailer. She was like, well, at least they're talking about it. At least they saw that, but we have so much planned for these characters. You're going to love them. And everyone was like, no, we do not love them. Didn't even get over 700 concurrent players on Steam when it launched. I didn't even get over 700. That's how bad this game did. But so they thought this game was going to be the future of PlayStation. They had such major ambition for this game that it was referred to internally as a Star Wars project for Sony. Why do people keep trying to describe things as their Star Wars? Star Wars sucks now. Star Wars is not something you want to be. Maybe you want to reach Star Wars as it was in the late 70s, early 80s, up and even till the early 2000s. That's maybe where you want to be if you want to talk about Star Wars, where it was this absolute juggernaut. It was the zeitgeist, but not anymore. It's not that anymore. Star Wars sucks. It's terrible. Like when you think of Star Wars now, you think of like garbage shows like The Acolyte. You think of terrible movies like The Last Jedi for the most part. You think of just absolute crap that Disney has just pooped out. It's not something you wish to achieve, at least not in my opinion. I don't even know what you would say that you would want to achieve. I mean, I feel like the biggest example for a show that got to the zeitgeist was Game of Thrones, but I'm not sure you want to be that either, because look how that turned out, and look at House of the Dragon. People have already tuned out of that. It's definitely not something you want to attain either. There really isn't anything that comes to top of mind now that hasn't been really ruined. That's still kind of something you would want to obtain, but they always are using Star Wars. This is bizarre to me. Anyways, tangent aside, Moriarty continued saying that it can be repeatedly revisited over and over and over again, not only in cross media, but in what we were seeing. He pointed to the game being featured in Prime Video's upcoming Secret Level show, as well as the weekly story vignettes the developers promised. He then shared there was a toxic positivity vibe. This isn't really like a term that I'm familiar with. So much so, I guess I've seen some of it with Star Wars Theory. He's kind of talked about this a little bit. It's basically these people who cannot criticize anything whatsoever. They always have to be positive, no matter how trash the thing that they're talking about is. They have to remain positive. They're so positive they start trashing people who are critiquing something or criticizing something. So they become really mean because they're trying to support whatever thing that they like. I guess that's how you kind of explain that. But he says that they had this kind of vibe at Concord, at Firewalk Studios, at PlayStation Studios. And he explained, you weren't allowed to say anything internally about this game, about how something is wrong with it. Character designs are not right. They really truly believed. This was Herman Holtz's baby, apparently. And he internally was himself a massive champion of the game. And I actually think, and that's basically the gist of it, of what Moriarty had to say there. I think this toxic positivity vibe thing is legitimate. I actually had an insider talk to me about this, talked about this in a previous video. I guess it was like last week. This source is close to probably Monsters, the original developers and owners of Concord and Firewalk Studios. And he had informed me that the Probably Monsters team had been shaken to its core due to not only the game's failure, but to the extent that it failed. However, he told me that while the company and its employees have been shaken by the failure, one thing that is not shaking them and that they are not even acknowledging is the game's embrace of woke ideology and diversity, equity, and inclusivity. They don't want to hear anything about that. They're completely ignoring it. They're sticking their heads in the sand. And I think that is something that goes side by side with kind of this toxic positivity vibe that Moriarty is talking about, because the source informed me in that part place that the company did indeed have discussions beforehand about how heavy it would embrace woke ideology. As shown in the game's final product, it does not appear that dissenting voices were able to bring any reason to those wanting to insert the woke ideology. And now it appears executives want to bury their heads in the sand. So that is what that source close to Probably Monsters informed me. So it seems like this is kind of rampant throughout all three of these companies: PlayStation, Firewalk, and Probably Monsters. And clearly it looks like it's at Sony as well, because we've seen things like Bungie, etc., having these problems as well. And it's not even just in Sony. Like, you can look at Activision, Microsoft, and all of this stuff. And these games are all failing. They're all failing. They're doing disastrous. But so I do think there is some legitimacy to this rumor, given the fact that I heard something similar from a source as well. And I don't know if it's the same source or whatnot, but interesting that there is some kind of similarity here. And I do think that lends credence to what Moriarty is saying and what his source is saying. But I mean, what an absolute disaster. If what he claims and his source claim are true, Concord is an even more epic disaster than originally imagined. I mean, people were saying $200 million. Moriarty himself was saying $100 million. I think Grum said around $100 million, 9 figures. He kind of was predicting that on one of the shows that he showed up on. But I mean, $400 million. And again, that does not even include what Sony paid to purchase Firewalk Studios. And what did they do? They shut this game down 2 weeks after it released and then refunded all of the sales. So absolutely zero money. They literally started uninstalling the game from people's hard drives, from their consoles. They were uninstalling it. I mean, absolute disaster. $400 million in development costs. Are you kidding me? Like, massive incompetence, managerial malpractice. How does Herman Holtz stay in his position after a failure this big? I mean, heads have to roll if this is indeed true. Sony has to be like, yo, you're done. I mean, you can't be losing the company. You can't be losing Sony $400 million and stay in that position. But I would not be surprised if they stay. I mean, look at Marvel. Look at Lucasfilm. How long has Kathleen Kennedy been at the head of Lucasfilm? How much money has she lost on all her Star Wars pet projects? How much money has Kevin Feige lost on Marvel with all his pet projects? How much money is Bob Iger costing the company? I mean, come on. So this is something that is a rot at the corporate level. We see this across all kinds of companies. And I don't think there's going to be change, because there is no meritocracy. These people are all about the woke ideology. You push the woke ideology, you get to stay in place, no matter how much money you lose. And that's a problem. That's a problem. We have to fix this. And we're going to keep making these people lose money, because we will not be playing games. We will not be buying games that push this stuff. And Concord is now, I think, the biggest example of this. I mean, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was up there. We know that they took a $200 million impairment charge, Warner Brothers Discovery did. But now we're getting $400 million. That does not even include what they paid for Firewalk and Concord. That is absolutely crazy. But it's not my money. It's their money. And they flushed it down the drain. They burned it to send a message. Fortunately for us, we did not accept that message. We said no. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.